It really is easier than ever to encrypt data with the Babbage SDK for yourself. We're going to be building a simple app where you can type in some data, encrypt it for yourself, and then we'll get back the decrypted value. Without further ado, let's get started in Terminal. I'll open my Projects folder, and we'll clone a simple React app to get started. Changing directories here, we'll go ahead and open up VS Code. And with the editor open, let's go ahead and just open up an integrated terminal here, and we'll install the project's dependencies by using npm I. Once dependencies are installed, let's just go ahead and open a new terminal and install the Babbage SDK as well, so that we can use it to encrypt some data with user-held keys. Once the Babbage SDK is installed, let's go ahead and open up the web browser here. So to do that, we'll just run npm run start, and we should see the browser open right up. Once the browser is open and you're looking at a page like this, we're ready to start making some changes. Let's go back to VS Code. Let's start off here by going to app.js. In this file, you can just see some basic things. Let's go ahead and import the Babbage SDK, which is the tool we're going to be using to facilitate encryption of user data. With the SDK imported, now let's just think a little bit about what kind of app we want to create here. I think we're going to want a text field where a user can type something, and then we'll want two buttons, one to encrypt some data and one to decrypt. Let's go ahead and just build out the basic components that we're going to use for this app. Now we'll just delete some of this placeholder code that was in here to begin with, save our changes, and let's look back at the web browser. Now you can see in the browser that we have just a very basic text field with two buttons. But let's go ahead and make this a little bit more functional and also just a little bit more stylish. I'm not going to be focusing on style here, but I mean, come on, I think we can do better than this. Right, and with those very slight improvements made, let's go ahead and actually hook up some functionality. We need to be aware of what the button is doing when we click on it and what the value is inside the text field. So for each of the buttons, let's go ahead and set up a click handler, and then we'll also set up a state variable in React to go ahead and track the value that's going to be stored in that text area. And now you can see we've got a state variable declared and two handlers created. Let's hook those up now. And with our handlers hooked up, it looks like we're ready to move to the next step. So now let's actually grab the value out of the text area inside the encrypt handler. And for now, we'll just alert it onto the screen so we know we're getting some functionality. Saving that change, let's go test it. And what do you know, when we change the value in the text area, we can actually see the result coming back to us here on the screen. Now let's actually jump into the encryption process. How are we going to encrypt data with a user-held key? For that, we're going to use the Babbage SDK's encrypt function. The way the encrypt function works is you can pass in a protocol under which that data is going to be encrypted. You can pass in a key ID under that protocol that's going to facilitate the encryption process, and then you'll get back some ciphertext, encrypted by a key that only the user has. Let's go ahead and write a simple encrypt call for the Babbage SDK. And now that we've got our encrypted data, let's just go ahead and print it out onto the screen to make sure we've got something useful. Saving these changes, let's go back to the web browser. It looks like we've got a pop-up here in the MetaNet client, and this is to be expected. The protocol that you specified, and I've specified here the Krypton protocol, and myself is the counterparty, meaning I'm the only one that gets to access this encrypted data. This is a permissions request, just making sure it's okay that the user is allowing this app to access this protocol, which can be used for data encryption. I'll just go ahead and grant this permissions request. And just like that, you can see that there's some encrypted data being displayed. Now let's just put it back into the same text area we got it from, and then we'll make the decrypt function work. So for the decrypt function, it's going to be just the exact opposite of the encrypt function. We're going to take the value, we're going to decrypt it, and then we're going to put it back into the text area, just where we found it. Notice here I'm using the exact same protocol ID and key ID I used for encryption. If you don't use the same protocol ID and key ID, the decryption process will not succeed. It's important to make sure that you're communicating the protocol ID and key ID clearly whenever you're using this in the real world. And now that we've got the decrypted data, let's just go ahead and put it back in the text area. And if we've done everything correctly, let's just go ahead and save these changes, go back to the web browser, and we'll see how this works. It looks like the encrypted data is now in the text area. Let's go decrypt it. It looks like we've got an error of some kind. Let's just see what that is. It looks like the decryption process has failed. Let's check out why it might have failed. After a bit of trial and error, I found out what the problem was. In our case, because we're actually requesting a return type of string on the encrypted value, when we go to send it back to the decrypt function, we need to parse it as a buffer. We need to create a buffer, a binary representation of the base 64 string, which can then be used to directly decrypt the value. It's important to make sure the data types you're working with are correct. And with that little bug out of the way, it looks like everything's working now. We can go ahead and encrypt this data. We can see it's encrypted, and then we can decrypt it. So that's a simple demo of self-encryption with the Babbage SDK. You can encrypt data for yourself, and then you can get it back again. This can be used to create a simple diary application where you write entries and keep them somewhere, or you can put the encrypted data on the blockchain. The Babbage SDK also has many other features, including the capacity to create Bitcoin transactions that facilitate micropayments between users, the capacity to facilitate multi-party encryption for things like a messaging app where privacy is paramount, and also the capacity to create digital signatures that attest to the legitimacy of documents or even to the user's identity. I recommend checking out projectbabbage.com if you'd like to learn more about the Babbage SDK, the ecosystem of MetaNet apps, and Bitcoin in general. Thank you.